Hello and welcome to our update on cyber smart payments as part of the Lloyds Bank Cardnet Insights series. I'm Juliette Mann, a business journalist and your moderator for the live question and answer session coming up. Do send in your questions and any feedback via that chat box underneath your player. Tesco, TalkTalk, the Bank of Bangladesh, the FBI, even allegedly the US election campaign, they've all been hacked. Cyber criminals want your data and ultimately your cash. So how vulnerable are small and medium-sized firms like yours, and what precautions could or should you be taking to be cyber savvy and secure? Well, those are questions I asked our expert panel in the recorded segment coming up. After that, our panel will be back here with me to answer your questions. We do need your name in the submission box, but we don't share those details and we don't say who's asking what, so don't hold back. Don't wait till the end and keep those questions coming in. I'll see you after this. Time now to introduce our panel. Phil Thomas is the Head of Products for Lloyds Bank Cardnet. He's been in the industry for 10 years and his remit covers new product development, including online cybersecurity solutions. We're also joined by David Fairbrush, OBE, who's a Technical Director of Cybersecurity at KPMG. He's worked in the UK's Ministry of Defence in various roles, including Head of Cyber and Space, and he ran the first ever UK-US cyber war game and carried out the first National Infrastructure Cybersecurity Review. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to Ken Monroe. He's a security entrepreneur, an industry maverick, and an ethical hacker. So Ken, your company tests computer systems and networks and web applications to find vulnerabilities that an attacker could exploit. So are cyber criminals easy to unmask?
No, in a word. Those who know what they're doing and make it incredibly difficult. That's the great thing about the internet, is it's easy to hide your tracks. It's very easy to bounce your traffic through anonymous relays in different territories, and actually, as a result of which, makes it very hard to work out who's doing that. It's not as if you can put on a balaclava and walk into a bank. It's actually much, much easier to hide your identity. Now, there are lots of tips and tricks you can do to try and unmask the hacker. Simple things like, what language did they write it in, or what time was the code they used to attack compiled? But you know what? The hackers know that too. So they'll change it, which makes it almost impossible to attribute a breach.
What do you think, David? There's no one-size-fits-all cyber criminal or cyber crime?
Most of what I deal with is business. It's organised criminality. It's quite rational entrepreneurial activity as well. And you can see the mindset operating there, which is, how do I get a return on my investment? When my investment is to developing new attack tools, targeting new organisations, or purchasing the skills, the labour and the capabilities I need from the computer underground, actually, as well. So it comes across as a very dynamic marketplace. And you can buy almost everything in that marketplace, from denial of service attacks through to money laundering, cash out. And the trouble is there's very different business models in there as well. So, I tend to do it in sort of three layers. There's a bottom layer which is commoditised. It is indiscriminate, it hits everybody. Every individual, every firm. Classics, ransomware, classic example of that. We are seeing dozens of new ransomware strains. Denial of service as well. So the layer above that for me is tailored. I'm going to spend time casing the joint first. I'm going to do my research on social media. LinkedIn, great. Find the financial controllers, the payment clerks, the corporate treasurers. And I'm going to get the right logos. I'm going to set up some spoof email accounts so it looks like it's coming in from somebody quite senior. And I'm going to play it into the CEO fraud mindset. And then there's the top bit for me. Top bit is the high-end stuff, like the Bank of Bangladesh you mentioned. That's months in planning and preparation. So the Bank of Bangladesh attacks, the Filipino bank account, which received the 81 million that was transferred, was set up, I think, May last year, before the actual cash out in February. And they were spending time doing the prep work, sitting around in people's networks, doing reconnaissance, working out how to defeat the fraud controls, then cashing out. So it feels very different on those layers.
It sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all, but it doesn't matter what size your business is.
A lot of it's quite rational. The commodity stuff is just get the basics right. So Cyber Essentials have been an example of that. Yeah. And it's all just about getting the basics of firewalls, separation, patching, antivirus. And those tailored attacks are as much about people as they are about technology. Because ultimately they're just cyber-enabled confidence tricks often, where the person can be the weakest link in the technical security measures. So you can put all the technical measures you want in the world in place, but if you can still socially engineer somebody to defeat those security measures, you've got an issue.
My phone rings once a day, usually from an organisation that's had their company bank account pilfered. And the reason they call me is they've probably spoken to their insurance broker and said, we've had some money stolen. And the broker goes, okay, how did it happen? I said, well, it was stolen from our bank account. It was an electronic fraud. And in so many cases, you find actually your theft policy doesn't cover electronic crime. And that's why they usually end up giving me a call, say, can you help me get the money back? And I say, well, I can probably tell you how it was done, but I can't get you the money back. And that's why it's really, really important to make sure, I strongly recommend you go and check your insurance policies and make sure, check with your broker, and just check that if money is stolen, you are covered. Because it always happens on payday. When bank balances are at their largest in the current accounts, someone gets a scam, they email something into usually to accounts payable, and a huge sum of money goes missing. One poor organisation, it was a very small solicitors firm, only a couple of solicitors there, and they fell victim to a scam and moved money out of the client accounts, thinking they were paying off a settlement that had been agreed, and because it was a scam, went to the wrong place. And the problem they had wasn't insured loss, and the only way that the genuine client could receive the funds was if the solicitor actually declared themselves in breach of the Solicitors Regulation Authority. They were then closed down, and the insurance policy for their SRA paid out. So a business was destroyed by a scammer.
Is embracing everything smart smart?
Again, you want to pay attention to this bit. This is a great example. This is my Wi-Fi kettle. And what I can do with my Wi-Fi kettle is I can hook it up to my mobile phone on my home network. And when I wake up in the morning, I can press the button. And by the time I get to my kitchen, I've got a kettle full of boiling water. Saved me, what, 30 seconds of my life, perhaps? But
You'll never get back.
Yeah, I know. Just think, but it's an expensive item. But it appeals to the geek in us all. So we want these toys. We want to be able to control things remotely from our phones. And the problem is because this sits on my Wi-Fi network, it needs my Wi-Fi network encryption key. And unfortunately, the problem with this is a hacker or a researcher can come past your house, point a wireless antenna at your house, and steal your Wi-Fi network key from your kettle. And once they've got that, I'm now on your Wi-Fi network. And that means I can now see everything that you're doing on your home Wi-Fi network. Your social networks, your banking, every password, the lot. But along the way, some of the manufacturers have really overlooked security, and they've appealed to the geek in us all, and they've ended up inadvertently compromising us. This is a CCTV camera. You probably use these things in your office, in your home to offer security, so you can see burglars and dissuade people from attacking you. But unfortunately, this is a digital one, and it works on a digital video recorder, a DVR. And recently, a number of security flaws have been found by what's called an internet worm called Mirai, which can compromise all your DVRs and start using them as a weapon to attack others. And you might have seen a little while back, there was large parts of the US internet infrastructure was taken offline on a Friday. I even lost access to Twitter. Wow, what worse things could happen. And this is an example of a denial of service attack. A botnet created a vulnerable Internet of Things devices. And the irony being is we buy these things to secure ourselves, but actually they can be turned into a weapon that's used against us. And something I'd strongly recommend you do, the volume of denial of service attacks we're seeing, just go and check to see if you've got a relationship with someone who can help you soak up all that malicious traffic. They're usually called soaking providers, and they're just there to make sure your website stays up and your legitimate customers can use it, and the hacker can't take you down.
What would you like to see companies like our audience members, what would you like to see them doing to address these kind of increasing cybersecurity issues?
For me, security comes down to three really simple things. It comes down to patches, and by that I mean the security updates, the software updates you put on all your servers. And usually the way we get in initially is actually someone's forgotten to update an important system. Or maybe it's something that someone's forgotten, something in an overseas office that's connected to the network maybe. Someone's forgotten something. And that's the first way in. The next way we usually find it is issues with passwords. If someone's got a blank password, a common password that's easily guessed, or a reused password, or a default password. So it's a manufacturer default, and no one ever changed it. So it's admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the last way we find our way in, actually organisations that have done it a bit better, we find it's the people factor that are vulnerable to social engineering. And I strongly recommend you make sure you're teaching your staff how to spot a social engineering attack, whether it's on the phone, or someone that's blagging the way into the business, trying to get into the front or back door, or showing them how to spot phishing emails. 3 Ps, patches, passwords and people. That's a great place to start.
I might add a couple more to that list. Banking Trojans have been around for absolutely ages just now. The principle is very simple. Click on the phishing email, malware on somebody's home PC or device, sometimes, compromises the browser, gets you into the middle of the communication with the bank. So you can manipulate that communication, intercept credentials, and the banks have got really good at putting two-factor authentication in place now. So when you do anything significant like setting up a new payment debit, you'll get a little SMS text message to your phone that you have to confirm. But organised crime groups hate letting go of an investment in tools and techniques. So if it doesn't work for banks, you can see the thought process of going, well, what would I use that against next? E-retail is now the target for some of the banking Trojans because you've already invested in the tooling. It's a slightly different target. Still works to get you in the middle of the communication between the client or customer and the retailer. And yes, of course, I've compromised your credentials. And yes, of course, I can put orders in that retail system, or I can change delivery addresses or even billing details as well.
What's Lloyds Bank Cardnet doing to help customers here?
The commoditised level, which would be what you'd expect of your acquirer and your software partners. So transaction blocking for fraudulent traffic is obviously something that should be our bread and butter. What we're increasingly deploying, though, are neural networks that are proactive rather than reactive. So spotting and tracking these wider trends and putting in place sophisticated systems to actually block those transactions before they become a threat and come up on some blacklist. The challenge alongside that is obviously balancing the high security that customers would demand of us with the ever-increasing consumer desire for the most convenience possible. And I think the message we'd probably give is that we get that it's not always easy. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, that it does need to be tailored. Customers aren't already engaged with us on some of the challenges on PCI. We're very happy to provide guidance directly, but also leverage some of the expert partnerships that we've got in place along things like the SOCA type companies who can actually provide that real specialist support in specific incidents.
Ken, where is the UK and UK businesses? Where are they in terms of being prepared, keeping safe?
I think we're certainly doing better than many territories. I think we're ahead of the curve. I think that's fantastic. But what's that started to show to me is that some of the everyday hacks, they've started to filter down into smaller and smaller organisations. Smaller and smaller businesses who've got less and less to invest in security are actually becoming the targets nowadays.
So David, how to do it right? How to get that balance right?
Getting the basics right matters, and I think that also includes the supply chain. So if I was speaking to banks just now, all of them are engaged now in supply chain security, third-party security. They're all beginning to say, well, actually, we require a basic level of security out of our key suppliers, because often they can be the route into compromising our systems as well. So you're seeing that happening. And then I think you're starting to layer your security beyond that.
But you also want to avoid some of the mistakes. And we've talked about passwords, but there are other
Passwords
things.
are fun. Passwords are fun. One of the things that always fascinates me is how many passwords are traded in the computer underground just now. So we're in a point where personal data is a commodity. It's sold on, it's actively traded, it's used to facilitate other attacks. So, of course, if you use the same password, you'll get it replayed to attack other sites as well. Once the initial site is breached and that password has been hacked and decrypted. So you can see that happening. So the way we're seeing other organisations begin to approach this is they say the password is not enough. So it might be a two-factor authentication for a major transaction. It might be, where did you log in from? Which device? What time of day? Little additional factors which you then factor into your fraud control measures as well. And we're seeing a lot of that on digital banking channels just now. What's one other bit though?
Biometrics?
So you've got the fingerprint recognition on your iPhone, but it's a halfway house. There's something fascinating for me which is called behavioural biometrics. They're about the way you behave online. One example is there's a little company who displays bouncing balls on the iPad as part of your login sequence. You track them with your fingertip. So it tells you whether you're left or right-handed, how long your arm is, as well, and the motion around it, the way you track it with your eyes, your response times around that. And that's all, it's not a complete solution, but it's another piece in the puzzle.
And as it's a game, that one particular one you're talking about,
good
that taps into this idea that customers want convenience, and there's that constant balance you're needing to strive between convenience and security.
And that's the biggest challenge I run into with every client I deal with. I can put all the security in the world in place, but if it gets in the way of customer experience, the customer journey, the usability, then I'm going to lose custom. You're into that interesting space of trading off. And the only people that can really do that are the business themselves. So I may have to put detection, response and recovery measures in place. And sometimes when we're developing new digital channels, I might want to try and make sure that I don't have an adversarial security officer just saying no.
It's not an IT thing.
Yeah, absolutely not. So I mean, security, it's a cultural thing. If so often people have seen data security as being data, therefore it sits in a database, therefore it's an IT thing. And it's not. Data is the lifeblood of our business, therefore it must sit at board level. Because then the board can say, well, we're going to look after our customer data and we're going to do it like this. Then the IT guys can implement it and contribute, but it comes from the top down. I think we're stuck with passwords for quite a while yet. But what I really struggle with is where we ask customers to take one more step to do something and then they fall off and don't complete their shopping carts. Yeah. And I've seen some really interesting things just in the last couple of weeks where I've seen retailers start looking at actually giving a financial incentive for a customer to take another step towards security. So asking for a one-time SMS to your phone, which makes it a lot more difficult to hack you, because I've got to hack your phone as well. It can be done, but it's a lot more difficult. Actually saying, okay, well, do you know what? Our fraud risk has just dropped because we know that consumer is prepared to take another step. Should we incentivise them to do it? And do you know what? That consumer only has to do it once, because once you've got that one-time SMS, you've authenticated them forever. Until they've changed their phone, of course.
And increasingly, those kind of steps may be what are needed to actually get the end consumer into that more security conscious mindset.
Consumer puts the responsibility in the hands of the merchant, though. Is that something you're finding, and how are you holding their hands?
When we've spoken to end consumers, they expect the retailer to be keeping those, looking after those card details, and then secondarily, whoever's issuing that card, as the acquirer, we're responsible ultimately to the merchant, our customer, for making sure if those details are being stored, we're doing so in the most secure fashion, but allowing the consumer to access them easily.
If one of your clients suspects that they have been hacked or they've been compromised in some way, talk us through how they should respond.
One of the biggest things that is needed is that preparation, proactive, mapping out what you will do in the event of a breach, assuming that it will happen, assuming some of the different scenarios, and having that in place proactively, so if and when it does happen, you're referring to a detailed plan in the same way you would your regular business continuity plans. That can extend to things like your communications, both to the end customer, because it's a lot better they hear about it from you than they do the media, and equally up to your key stakeholders within the board. If we said that it's got to sit at a board level, it's got to be a board level resolution, and having that kind of playbook in place, and also considered some of those secondary factors such as your insurance policies, having that prepared ahead of time means that you're able to react to an event with a kind of that pre-designed playbook.
What you need to do is be prepared for this, because it's going to happen at some point. Another thing I'd encourage you to do is get the board ready, because somebody somewhere is going to doorstep one of the board on the back of a breach, and go and doorstep your board and pretend that actually it's happening for real.
The things that catches people out, it's the sheer pace of the media response, and I don't just mean conventional media, I mean social media. It's very public, very, very quickly. Not prepared to respond to that quickly with statements. You're often not quite sure what's happened. There's various options. You may need to do some forensics and investigative work. If you've got the specialist support to do that quickly, that takes time. And in that time, you've got execs who are going, I don't quite know what's happened here. So I know there's been service disruption, but has there been a data breach? And that uncertainty is killing unless you actually try and exercise some of those scenarios in advance. And there's only realistically 3 or 4 major scenarios, actually, or combinations of those. So once you've got a bit of muscle memory, it helps a lot.
So let's talk about insurance. If I've got it right, if you're hacked, you're responsible, or is the bank responsible?
Answer the first part of your question is actually you need to read what your insurance policy says, because the insurance policy wording varies enormously around crime or theft, cyber, first party, third party. Check what your policy says, and if you're not clear, you ring up and you ask your broker and you ask for a statement to say, yes, if someone hacks your computer and steals money from your bank account in a business, you're insured.
So the banks currently will say it's case by case, and they will treat it that way. So normally, if an example would be your personal bank account is compromised, then normally they will refund you the value of those fraudulent transactions, and no questions will be asked, unless there's an ongoing pattern of this occurring. The business position is much, much more complex just now. So in general, banks may choose to refund, but you'll get to the point where increasingly that may change over time. I think this whole debate is live just now, and some of it is back into how do you generate the right behaviours across the community.
The banks are putting measures into place to help customers along the way, tokenisation, for example.
Yeah, I mean, the tokenisation is something that's come from Visa and MasterCard around securing those, the next generation of payments that are coming from that mobile phone, the mobile device. And Apple Pay and Android Pay have been set up on this kind of universal standard with the card details tokenised behind it. The theory goes that all mobile type methods that follow that same methodology should sit on a very similar type of rails in order to drive overall usage, and with that some kind of overall security. The test will come when some of the new regulation that is going to open up the payments market in the next couple of years hits home, and there may be a proliferation of potential new methods which choose to follow it in order to get the mass usage, and which maybe go a slightly different direction, because even while one set of standards is being created and adhered to, there'll be something following very hard on the rails.
And that new regulation is May 2018?
You've got two regulations
things,
coming along, which will be fun. So PSD2, Payment Services Directive. Another regulation was the General Data Protection Regulation. That cuts in May 2018. That's fun. So that is a major extension of the Data Protection Act, all around consent to process personal data, appropriate security around personal data, a notification obligation as well, not just to the Information Commissioner, but also to the customers who are impacted by any data breach. And for those who really, really don't implement the appropriate controls, a fine that runs up to 4% of global turnover as well.
For me, the last part of that, the mandatory breach disclosure notification, is a game changer. So, mandatory breach disclosure notification. Guess what? It's coming over here too. You're going to see a lot of UK and European breaches suddenly making the press.
So I suppose you think that companies should be hiring ethical hackers regularly to test their systems?
If you look at PCI data security standard, so part of that is that you have to do very specific types of review, security review. But that's not the be all and end of it. There are lots of other processes you have to go through. But part of that, during your development process for applications, when you're coming to market, when you're changing things, when you're doing new things, that's when to do it. But I'd say it's just as important to embed security in your business as well.
It's important to have people in your business who think from the mindset of the attacker or criminal. And having a few people who are prepared to take on that role and get into it and really live that role is really powerful inside an organisation.
That's a really good point, actually, because when we're developing applications and making our e-commerce sites and making things work, it's the other side. So how do we break this so that the application, the website, the retail thing, whatever it may be that comes out to our customers, do you know what? It's already secure.
We see it working with multinational retailers that the best examples are where the whole security element, payment, identity and physical security, it's seen as an ecosystem. Where we see people running into trouble with PCI DSS is often where it's seen as a static compliance exercise rather than being part of that wider security plan.
How does having a text message sent as that extra piece of security, how does that help the consumer and the business?
The problem is that Joe Public uses the same password for everything. So
There was a Deliveroo.
in fact, just recently Deliveroo were hacked. Well, actually, they weren't hacked at all. There was nothing really wrong with their systems. But because customers had used the same password on other websites that were hacked, the hacker goes, oh, I think I'll try those in a bunch of other websites, and found that they matched on Deliveroo, for example. But there's loads of other examples, like Tesco's Club Card. Their website got done in the same way.
From a corporate perspective, what's the most useful direction to take in terms of password protection?
I would strongly advise everyone here to think about getting a password manager. They're all free, but little apps on your mobile phones and your desktops that can all synchronise, and they take away the overhead of managing passwords. There are two issues to bear in mind. First of all, you need to make sure that your iCloud account password is really good, because now you're putting all of your passwords in your iCloud account. So that one password, the master password, if you like, has to be really good, and you've got to remember that one. Not your dog's name or your football club. Again, what it comes down to is actually teaching people how to make a good password. Most password crackers start off by default with a US keyboard code page. And what's not on there? The pound sterling sign. So I'd strongly recommend you think about country-specific characters. That's not to say there aren't password crackers out there that crack the UK keyboard, but it's another step. The hacker has to think, who am I attacking? This is a UK citizen. I need to go and get the right keyboard layout to cover them.